Welcome to the Dream On podcast. I am Travis Gentry.
And I'm Julia Gentry.
And so every time we like to start off with a question that's off the cuff that we just ask each other to get the podcast started so you can get to know us a little bit more. So my question today is for Julia, and we go back and forth. My question today for you is, what is the one thing that you've changed in your fitness journey over the last year that has really made a difference on like how you feel, like the results that you've gotten?
I do push-ups.
Push-ups? So you've never done push-ups before that?
No. Why do people do push-ups? Actually, I know why people don't do push-ups, because I don't actually feel good doing push-ups. But I would say that they are giving pull-ups and push-ups huge results.
I was gonna say yeah, I've seen you do pull-ups.
Yeah.
I thought you always did push-ups.
Never. No.
The foundation of
it's so
working
funny.
out is, can you do a push-up? Can you do one?
You know what's so funny though is that now our challenge this year, because I've been doing push-ups and almost every other day I'm doing push-ups, and for this last year, solid. And so this year our team has to be able to at least do a minimum of 24 push-ups at one time, or if they can currently do 24 or 50 or however many, they have to at least double what they can do. And so one of our team members was like, dear Lord, please explain to me why we're doing this. And so as I'm saying it, I found myself going like, oh, that's real cute, Julia. I was like, it is the best overall. If you're going to do something, it's like one of the best overall things you could do is a push-up, because it engages so many different parts of your body if you're doing it right. And as I was saying, I was like, yeah, I probably should have started this, I don't know, 20 years ago. But yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Nice.
Pull-ups and push-ups.
Alrighty.
Everyone should try it. They should. It really change your life too, I promise.
All right. So right into the topic. What are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about something that I think is just near and dear to our hearts. And it's ultimately discussing, are we going to send our kids to college? And this is truly a podcast that we hope every parent listens to. But here's our heart behind the podcast today is Travis and I want to share why we've decided to homeschool our children. We have 5 children under the age of 9. And this decision happened prior to COVID. So we are not homeschoolers because of COVID. We are homeschoolers for different reasons. So we wanted just to share with you a little bit of our heart around why we do that. And then ultimately invite you guys into our process and the way that we are looking at college as a family. But the fun part about this is that Travis and I kind of have a general idea of where we both stand in this, but we're going to invite you all, our listeners and our dreamer community, into our process around how we're going to make this decision, because it's not like this we've decided and this is what we're doing. It's more of a, hey, this is a conversation that you get to actually hear us process where we are in this and how we think about it, and hopefully give you guys as a family the tools to have these same critical conversations.
Yeah, and we literally have not had like an in-depth conversation. Obviously, our kids are young enough, but you start to think of like, okay, what is, once they graduate or once they go through our homeschooling and they're able, like what are they going to do?
Yeah.
And are they going to go to school, or are they going to start a job, or are they going to start a business?
Yeah.
And so this is somewhat real time for us, but we got to spend some time. We each spent time separately to understand and think about it. And so we're coming together to kind of process it and invite you in on how we do conversations, and maybe just a few food for thought items that you can take away and be like, oh, I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I want to dive in because I know, again, our agreement to homeschool was very mutual very quickly. But I would love to hear your heart fully around, why did you personally decide that you wanted to homeschool our kids?
The reason why
you wanted me to homeschool.
Yeah.
I was trying not to throw you under the bus. Tell me why you decided to have me be the teacher of this relationship. Let's just be honest. Why did you employ me to do this and pay me nothing?
I think there again, it comes back to my experience through school. I didn't do good in school. I was in special ed basically since I was, second grade, all the way through high school, graduating. Barely graduated with help
With help, right?
with help
You're gonna define
is what I'll call it. In different ways. We won't.
Someone needs to write that
amazing.
down. I graduated with help, y'all.
I didn't have Chat GPT. I didn't have these like web forums and people.
He had his sister.
I had other people. I was resourceful. Let's just say.
You were a visionary.
Totally. I looked at school as a team effort, not an individual sport.
This is the best thing I've ever heard. This is a we thing, right? Like we are taking like we are writing the summary of this book.
Yeah, we got a test this week, right?
Like, why does it say Travis and Laura Taffet is the person who wrote it?
You're supposed to take your name off there. So I think it was through my experience of school, and I think school definitely has its place. And through this podcast, I want to drop some different quotes and scriptures that I found that we're kind of processing and thinking about. And one of them that I found is formal education will make you a living, self-education will make you a fortune, Jim Rohn, which I thought was fascinating. And it's like, education definitely has its place.
Yeah.
You have to have the fundamentals down: reading, writing, arithmetic.
It's a we. It's again we.
Yeah, how do I do that?
Look at you outsourcing that. That's why you're an incredible entrepreneur.
So I think you have to have the fundamentals.
Yeah.
And then, through that, you can then start to like discover and, try other avenues.
Yeah.
That's where history or science or, a little bit more advanced math comes in, where you can explore and see, like, do I have a natural God-given talent and gift for this? And do I like come alive when I'm learning about this subject?
Okay. So that, Joe, I don't want to interrupt you.
No, I think that, so I think for the homeschool, I think one, it was the foundation is what we're doing now. So we're in the midst of like laying the foundation.
Yeah.
So what I'm really excited about is this next step or season. One, our kids are going to be, after they can read and do some of the basics, they're going to be a little bit more self-sufficient, but then both of us get to come in and showcase and show them different avenues.
Yeah.
Experientially.
Yeah.
Because that's how I learn. Is I need to do it, I need to see it, I need to experience it, as opposed to just sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day.
Which explains your approach to school, which is why school didn't work for you.
100%. And so, and then
it's not that he's actually special needs people, by the way. And if you are, do you, like, we're not here to say, but what's fascinating to me in your journey is that when I watch you as your wife and someone who's run alongside you for so long, is you truly are one of the most incredible minds that I've ever met. You have an ability to learn and absorb information like I've never seen. And so what's so fascinating for someone like me, had I not actually known that about you, I would have automatically thought, oh, you probably did great in school because of how I see you now.
Mm-hmm.
But that is actually not true. Like it was like you know what I mean? Like it's like
it was not true at all. I was so bad in school, guys. That I was in classes with other individuals that English was their second language. No joke. No joke. There's a truth bomb for you right there. So that's where I come from.
This is my favorite show ever. I'm going to watch this back and back and back and back and back and back. Okay.
So why do you think, because our experience of school is so different. And so I liked school. I liked gym class. I liked all the things where I got to be social. And
social said you never. What does that mean?
Social in the sense of like activities that I liked. I liked cooking class. Actually, in high school, I went through half day and I did culinary school because I liked cooking for a minute.
For a minute, y'all. It's like, where did that translate? That we missed that too.
I can make a mad burger right now. Spaghetti, burgers. I got it.
Like, no, you said, like, what's for dinner? I was like, as I sing. Literally say
one of our tops. We have 6.
Burger. Like, I can't even get the word out of my mouth. And she's like, no.
We have a rotation of 6. And Chipotle and Chick-fil-A are rotated in that.
Your burgers aren't good. And she's like, no, like slow motion.
We like to keep it simple.
Okay, so I don't forget what we're talking about. But So it's interesting though that you're saying this about that. My approach to school was very different than yours because I was the A plus by the book, exceeded expectations. Like I just remember, but for me, and when I was really leaning into this and looking at education, education underneath it is defined by two very different things, which was fascinating to me. It's schooling and learning. And I think what happens in the education, it's not actually education systems anymore. It's a schooling system, which is very different than learning. And so for me, I was in the school system and it never taught me to love learning. And then, in fact, because of the school system, and I gotta love them, but my dad's approach to I don't care what you do, just do good at it and get good grades and like do the things. There was a ton of stress around learning. So for me, I truly to this day have to be very cautious in how I approach any type of new learning because it actually like I feel more stress about it because it was I felt like that system was so ingrained and it needs to be the right way. And so I've had to unlearn that in my mind. But I think for me, when I'm looking at parenting, is I want our kids to fall in love with learning because even as I watch you as your wife, there's nothing you can't do because there's nothing you won't learn.
Mm-hmm.
Truly, like I will put on your gravestone, there was nothing this man couldn't do because there was nothing this man couldn't learn. And that to me is like the definition of what education should be. And one of my favorite quotes I found is by Einstein, and he says that the responsibility of education is to educate the individual as a free individual to know how to think for yourself, but also to learn in such a way that you can be part of society and be a service to the community to your highest life achievement. Mike, that's why I wanted to homeschool, is that I watched your life going, nothing he can't be because there's nothing he can't learn. And if I'm actually learning and I love what I'm learning, not only am I able to think for myself, really unpack ideas and like, oh, what do I believe here? But then ultimately I get to be of service to people because of my life's achievement. That's why I chose homeschooling.
Yeah.
So that's
I also think, and we talked about obviously before we started doing that, I think it's the difference between, you know, the school system tends to tell you what to think as opposed to how to think.
Yeah.
And I think the world that we live in is, and what we do and being, you know, self-employed is that we have to think like how to think, not just what to think.
Yeah.
And so I think laying that foundation for our kids too, of like, we're gonna know the basics and you have to know those. But then as you get older, we're gonna go down with each kid to a certain degree and allow them to explore so they can learn how to think.
Yeah. And I think for me, the biggest roadblock that I've had to overcome and continue to have to overcome, and I hear this from so many moms like, well, I'm not a teacher. I'm not a teacher. Well, at some level, like that is your job as a parent. You are a teacher.
You're 100% a teacher.
You know, like you're not only a teacher in your words, you're a teacher in the way that you live. Like that is your job now for the rest of your life. If you're a parent, sorry, you are a teacher. And so immediately though, what we go to is this in the box idea of what teachers are, which is really more around schooling, which to me, if I'm putting a poo-poo on anything right now, is the schooling process, because the schooling process ultimately was created to like manufacture the process. I get that whole idea to like simplify it, but at some level, because all of us are created so uniquely, that schooling process actually doesn't work for people, right? And it starts to dumb that down. But I think as a mom, I had to go, man, I am their teacher. I am their example. I am the one who knows their God-given identities. I'm the one that needs to understand their ins and their outs and be able to call that out in them. And so that was and continues to be something that I have to continue to override in my own mental framework or the quote unquote systems or naysayers is no, I am a teacher. That's my job. Mom equals teacher. Mom equals example.
You may, if you send your kids to school, you may not be the teacher as far as teaching them how to read and write, but you are the example. You are a life teacher of like how they should act and in the principles that the foundation of who they are. And this is a great scripture, Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And so you that is your role and responsibility.
Yeah.
is what is the principles and the foundation and the like we have a mission statement and values for our family because that's what we believe on outside of, or I should say alongside of the biblical principles that we believe in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I would say, as we've made this decision and continue to have children, because when we decided to do this, we were homeschooling when we had 3 and then 4 and 5. And, but I think for me, it is a challenge, because I have to fight the controller in me. I have to fight it needs to be done the right way. I have to fight I'm not good at this often, and I think that there was a huge turning point in our relationship when I remember the day you looked at me and you're like, do you want me to, do we want to stop doing this? Because I was coming back to you like a lot, like, this is hard, this is hard, this is hard, because it's not glamorous and you don't feel like you're getting anywhere. And I just remember the day that we decided, no, just don't let me tap out. Like, that was so huge. Like, I'm going to come to you and I need a safe place to think about, like, how do I think about this differently? How do we do this differently? How do we make it more efficient and more effective for them, and that it brings out the best in me? And, and I just remember the day that we collectively said, okay, we're not going to tap out. And that was an important piece, because I think in the back of my mind, if I ever, I'll tap out, like, well, you're going to, because it's hard. But that's been huge for me. Just go ahead. I'm not going to tap out. I just need to find the best way that works for us. That's the whole point of homeschooling.
Yeah. And that's why we homeschool our kids. There's not a right or wrong. But I would say if you do send your kids to school, you do have an obligation to teach them outside of the school system your principles.
Yeah.
And if you have a mission statement and values that you can instill in your kids, then I think every family should. But that is your role and responsibility.
And I would say, I think it's also our job is to be this troubleshooter, in that one kid doesn't learn the same way. And so getting out of the mindset of schooling our kids, but in helping our kids learn. And so if kids are not great, like Malachi is off the charts with numbers and algorithms. And I mean, we're even seeing this in the Rubik's Cubes. I mean, the way that this kid can memorize algorithms and numbers, but his spelling, like his approach to spelling is just, he does not have it. Right. And then I look at Aslan, and her ability to absorb Bible verses is like nothing I've ever seen. I mean, she's got the fastest absorption of that, but her math doesn't come as easy. Right. And so you're still kind of noticing her. But it's funny because if you were to ask me right now, 7 plus 11 or 7 plus 6, I'd be like 79. I have the very similar, like my brain doesn't kick into that as well. And so I guess I say all this because I feel like sometimes what we do as parents is that if we see our kids not doing as well in the schooling system, we continue to like push harder, as opposed to, wait a minute, this is a signal for me to come at this from a different angle. Like, how will this child learn best? Right? Like, I feel like we just continue to put them in the box of the way that it should be, as opposed to going, wait a minute, the goal is not schooling. The goal is love for learning. And so if we keep putting them in the box of schooling, they're never going to love learning.
Yes.
And so even when Malachi comes to me and says, well, Mama, but this is hard for me, and I can tell, he's like, do I have to do packets again? I sit down with him like, dude, like, you've got to tell me then, like, help me understand, what do you love learning right now? What's a different approach? What's a different way? And so I don't go, well, great, we don't have to learn how to spell. I just need to find his way to loving the process.
Yeah. And we have that flexibility and freedom to do that and understand the school system. It's a big animal, and they have their like checklists and the way they do certain things, and that doesn't fit every kid. It fit you, or you fit into it. I personally did not.
Yeah.
And so some kids thrive in it and some kids don't. But really, I think more importantly is when they get out of, what you would consider like graduating high school, and then what does that look like? Because I think what we're instilling in our kids is like the drive and the hunger to learn.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people, even out of college, they get a college degree and then they think that their learning is over. It's really just beginning again at a different level in a different field.
That's the problem, is that I think that nobody's actually teaching, and I guess nobody's actually teaching the love of learning. They're just teaching schooling, right? Be taught this so that you do this, but you're not actually falling in love with learning, which is why I think people get into jobs that they don't like, doing things that they don't want to do for 20, 30 years, not because they weren't schooled, they just didn't ever learn to love learning.
Yeah.
Right.
And understanding learning is a way to be free. Like once you learn, like the process of learning, there's certain things that no one can take away from me.
Yeah.
Like I can go now and I can flip a house and I can make tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can go to the stock market and I understand and I can read the charts where I could potentially make money that day, whether the market's up or down. So the learning never stops for me because it just equips me even more, and it allows me to live in that state of freedom because I know that I can always go out and provide for my family, and I'm passionately learning about something that is going to help us not only now but in the future. And so I think for most people, that's why most of them work, jobs that they don't like after college, and then they stop learning, and then they complain about whether it's their finances or their health or the kids. And it's like, no, like when we have a situation with the kids, our first thing is like, what do we need to know that we don't know about this situation?
This is so good. And I just feel like that means, I mean, if learning is your path to freedom, which is there's nothing I can't do because there's nothing I can't learn, then really stuck is not a thing. Stuck is never a thing because especially, I mean, okay, I'm reading through Genesis and you're like, we live in a time that we could legitimately Google how to do anything and we would have step by step ways to make that happen. You read Genesis, you're like, the times that like Joseph's brothers went back and forth from their father Jacob to Joseph in the palace to back was like 9 days of travel. They're like, hey, go get your dad. And then if you read the footnotes, it's a 9-day, like you got to travel on foot for 9 days. You're like, we read, oh, they just go to your dad and get dad and come and tell him that I am the Pharaoh. And but what's so fascinating is like, so now we live in a place that I think we believe that we're stuck, and we're like, we don't live in Genesis. You don't have to like travel 9 days to go get your dad. You need 9 seconds to type in. But I think the problem is that, and for me too, like I didn't learn to love learning. And so there's always been that barrier, right? But even to your point, I've watched this last year, even with in our company, I've watched Cammie, who's the director of operations, know that this was the role she was supposed to be in, but ultimately know nothing about what she's doing today. But she's so hungry to learn it that she's figured out a way to master it by learning it. And I think that that's like fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And I think it's pertinent to these statistics. Which is why we go, why do I need to be listening to this topic? Because 85% of people are dissatisfied with their jobs worldwide. 85% are dissatisfied. But then check this out. It says 60% reported being emotionally detached, and then 19% are miserable. And I found those statistics so fascinating because I think that it's right. The schooling system positions us for these statistics if we're not careful. And I'm not saying that education is bad. So again, I'm using education, schooling, and learning. Those are very different terms.
Yes.
But then I think why this conversation is so important at any age, not even for our kids or 19, but at 49, is that there's such a high percentage of dissatisfaction and then emotional detachment and then even just miserable, when the reality is that if we could love to learn, we're free to do anything.
Yeah, there's no limitations.
There's no limitations.
Yeah, and there's a couple of quotes just as we continue to talk about this. Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Malcolm X. And then
good old Malcolm X. I love me some Malcolm X.
A thorough knowledge of the Bible is worth more than a college education. Theodore Roosevelt. So it's like, there again, the principles that you teach at home. So going back to the homeschool until they graduate and hopefully move out and hopefully pursue what they their God-given talents, and is the foundation and the principles that you teach them at home. Yeah. So whether you homeschool or not, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. We choose to homeschool. We think we have more control over the environment.
Yep.
And there again, you could get in a conversation about the pros and cons of both.
Yeah.
And so you need to decide for yourself what makes more sense. Some people don't have the time.
Yeah.
We both are self-employed, so we have that ability to do that.
Yeah.
And that's our commitment. That's the hard we're picking.
Yeah.
And so now going on to college, as we have this and we have, Malachi will probably be done with school by the time he's like 16 or 17. And so then what is next?
Yeah.
What is that? And do you start, saving for it? And they have different plans that you can start to put some away for them, because education it's a business, and it's an expensive business that you pay into.
Yeah. So much so. Check these statistics out. It says that the cost of college has doubled over the past 4 decades, that the student loan debt in the US has increased by 66% and equates to $1.7 trillion. It says that the average debt for a 4-year bachelor's degree is $34,700. And as of a year ago, only 62.3% of undergraduate students in the US even completed their degree. And only 46% of all college grads said they are currently working in their field of study, which was fascinating to me.
Super fascinating. I mean, there again, it's been a hot topic the last couple of years with the student loan forgiveness, and it's forgiven, it's not forgiven. And then the people that did pay it off, they're frustrated. And the people that are going to be forgiven, they're excited. And you're like, at the end of the day, I believe you got to take responsibility for whatever you chose. So if you signed up for that debt, you should be reliable for it. And I think you've got to look at there again, how we're looking at college is, I don't think there's a right or wrong, because I think you need a degree if you're going to go into certain fields.
Sure.
Like if you're going to be a doctor, if you're going to be an attorney, if you're going to be a CPA, like you have to go through a certain system to get those certificates. And so I think that's important. There again, I don't care personally if our kids go to college or not. It depends on what their passions are and what their purpose is, and what are they going to do, and understanding there are a few different ways that you can gain the skills that you need. You can internship, you can go to college, you can pay a mentor, you can go get on the job training, you can get learn through just doing and fumbling around and practicing it. And so there's a lot of different ways that I feel like our kids could go, depending on, like, Malachi to Aslan, they're very different on potential skill sets and desires and wants in life.
Yeah.
But I also think that no matter what path they choose, not only with the principles that we teach them, but it's also, I think, important to teach them like the money principles too.
Yeah.
That I feel like that's great. If you want to be a teacher and you are probably capped out at a certain amount, you have to go get a degree to be a teacher. But then what are you going to do to set yourself up for success in the long run?
Okay, so let's unpack all that, because there's so much in there. So for me, as I consider this, I feel like you're right. If I want to be a doctor and I want to be a lawyer and I want to be a teacher, there are degrees that set you up for success in that field. My fear if Malachi in 3 years says, okay, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor, I would still lean towards go intern for a year first, because I think what happens when you look at anything from the surface level, it all looks beautiful, and there's like a dark side to every industry. So though there's a lot of maybe glamour, or so it appears, being a doctor, or glamour and being a lawyer, or even, right, he watches you doing stocks, and I love that he always says, my dad makes so much money. And you're like, yes, but like, he doesn't understand, like, you spend a lot of money, and you spent tons of hours, and like, so I just feel like, for me, even if they're showing signs that is their bend, their natural talent, their hunger for learning, I still feel like, for me, I would want them to go practice that for a year to ensure that that's what they want to do, the good, the bad, the hard, the ugly, before actually signing up to even go to college.
I'm on the same page. Why do you think that?
Because I see too many people that, again, are getting into any type of field or doing anything because of what it appears to look like from the outside.
Yeah.
Us too, right? Like we've tried a lot of things going like, oh, that looks great. Now you and I have trained ourselves to go, great. Okay, I'm proud of you that looks great. Anyone can see the great, but do you fully understand the cost, the risk, the hard? Like, are you willing to do the hard, not just do that? And so I think that I want our kids to not just want to look good. I want them to be able to do to be good.
Yeah, because just because you're a doctor doesn't mean you make boatloads of money.
No.
Just because you're an attorney doesn't mean you graduate and you make a ton of money.
Or it might not even mean that you actually like the day-to-day of the job.
Yeah.
Like I don't remember who this was, and maybe you can, but there's a couple UFC fighters that you follow, and some of them love all of it, right? Like Conor McGregor, like he loves all the things, and it's fun to watch him because it's very obvious he likes the interviews, he likes the fighting, like he likes all of it. But a lot of fighters who like the craft of fighting hate the interviews. Like they hate the drama of the in-between and getting on the camera and answering all the questions because they just want to fight. And so what can happen for some people is that they're not prepared for the interview, like all those other things. And so they don't actually get in it and stay in it because they just didn't understand that, or they didn't want it enough or whatever. But that to me is a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I think that example, like thinking of some of the people that are the most successful financially are the people that love all aspects of it, because it's a show that they put on. So they create a brand for themselves, and people tune in because there is the character that they've created. And some of them have drama and some of them don't. But the brand that they create, people tune in to watch that individual. Yeah. And so they are going to be more successful, not only in outside of fighting, because the sponsorships that come along and opportunities, but if they're good and they can back it up in the octagon, it's like you've got the 5% that are.
But I think, isn't that incredible? Is that potential? That potential is to remember at the gym the other day when I wrote, "Aren't you curious what will happen if you don't quit?" And then a couple days later, someone writes, "Not really." And I was like, oh my gosh, like energetically for days, I could not let go of this comment. And then I finally sat with it. And I was like, why am I so frustrated? And I think it was because there was a little bit of this piece of me that went, we have worked so hard to actualize our potential that it just bothers me that other people don't, because it's like we work so hard at doing it. And so I just wrote back. I finally rectified. I was like, no, I'm not mad at this person. I'm just proud that we keep choosing to do the hard things, because it showcases our potential. So I wrote back, your loss potential is a choice. And so I think what's interesting when you're talking about those anomalies is that the potential that they have is not even unique to them. Maybe that skill is, but potential's on the inside of us. Actualization of that potential is just a choice within all of us. And so for me, God didn't make us each to go, well, he's the anomaly and you're not. Like, that's not the God that we serve. And so I believe that all of us are an anomaly at some level if we just find the game that we love. Gary Vaynerchuk says that, like, I don't do it for the lovers, I don't do it for the haters, I do it for the love of the game. And I feel like what I want for our kids is, and people go, well, go to college to figure out what you want to do. No, please don't do that. That's
one of the worst
pieces of advice.
Ideas.
Literally, I love you parents, but if you're saying that to your kids, you really need to stop saying that, because that is absolutely, unequivocally,
it's such a waste of time.
Of time and money. And you're not actually even you're going back to learning the basics again of mathematics. That is not an exposure to real life or talent or potential or creativity, or that is the worst advice ever. And in fact, you should only be going to school to learn those basics again because you're en route to learning, right? Okay, I want to be a doctor. So great. Yep, I got to do the work. Like, I got to do this thing. So I think the first couple of years out of our high school experience needs to be around 3 to 4 years of internships. Like, go learn from some of the best of the best. And as parents, like, what I want for our kids is that if we think about a college education being $40,000, I would rather spend that $40,000 giving them 4 years to intentionally go learn from the people or the businesses or the nonprofits or the organizations that are going to showcase what's possible, introduce them to themselves, showcase the weaknesses, build on their strengths. Like, that to me is a better return on our investment then A, nothing, B, just go get a job, or C, go to school and you'll figure it out.
Well, I think our approach to that is going to be totally different, because once they're at that age where they can go get a job or work, I think that you can start then, and it's fine to go have a job at, Chick-fil-A or Chipotle or whatever it is. But it's like, no, I'm going to push them to go do what are your interests and go either work, or I'll allow you to work for free to go get that experience.
Yeah, but as he says, I want to work at Chick-fil-A because I get free ice cream.
Well, I wouldn't be mad because I do like Chick-fil-A.
It.
So that's fine.
The job.
But I want her to do it for a reason, not just to go get a paycheck. Because that's one of the things that I don't want to teach our kids, is that I don't want you just to do something just to get paid and trade your time for money. I want you to understand the value of your time. And then also through this process of like the greater the value and the greater the need that you serve, the more money you're going to make. And there again, if you want to be a teacher, or Aslan wants to be a teacher, I'm all for that. Go through that, get a degree, be a teacher, make whatever they make. If you want to work your way up, great. But outside of that, what are you doing to invest your money? So at some point, there's going to be a switch within 10, 15 years that you ultimately have that choice of like, do I want to keep doing this or not? And that's what I want to instill in our kids. And that's what we are continually working for, of like, we love what we do. I never want to retire because I want to learn something else and then see how I can potentially offer that to, or solve a problem and get compensated for it. But I want them to be able to dual track and understand. And that there again comes back at home, because the school system doesn't teach you money principles. They teach you how to add and subtract, and in 10 years, who knows what it's going to look like as far as the monetary system, but it's all going to be pretty much the function the same way. There's going to be some kind of system in place no matter what happens. And so how do you what's important is for them to understand how it works. And so when they go out into the real world, it's like they're equipped on that side too. There again, we talk physically. I want them to understand like the food you eat is important. Taking care of your body is important. I think everybody should work out. I think, spiritually, make sure that you are connected with your source and understand like the biblical principles that, we feel like our family's foundation is on. Relationships and love and joy, and all there again, coming back to the principles is everything that I think that we're going to equip our kids with. They can go out and do whatever they want, whether it's college or it's not, but they're going to have a good understanding and look at it from a different way, as opposed to, I'm just going to get a degree and then get a job and then work there for 30, 40 years and then retire. Like that plan, I feel like is kind of blown up.
I agree. And I think even if you look at it from a scripture perspective, Colossians 3:23 says, whatever you do, whatever your task may be. Again, there's no hierarchy in heaven in regards to this, but I love that it's literally telling us whatever you do, even the tasks, work from the soul. The soul. Put your very best effort as something done for the Lord and not for men. And I think that my heart around this too is where your kid's going to college. That's really not the question. That's actually not the question. The question is, how are we helping our kids love learning? That I think starts to change everything, because when we evoke a hunger to learn and then we teach them, do that with your whole heart, from there, then my input is all in. So to your point, my output is going to be all, right? Like half heart equals half results. Whole heart equals whole results. And I think that to me is really how I think we're looking at this, is like developing within them the love of learning and the stewardship principles that are going to keep them solid. Now we're talking about a generation who knows how to play ball. Like that to me that's what I'm after.
And there again, I have a associate's degree and you don't have college at all. So I think it depends. I think people look at it in a way, and it used to be, even when I graduated high school, going into college, I didn't feel like I had any other choice. And even though I wasn't good in school, I didn't like school. It was like, if I didn't go to school, then like There was no one else was teaching me of like, oh, try this or do this, or, go explore or take a year off. Like, it was very like, you go to college. And that's what I saw my older sister do. She went to college and got a 4-year degree. And so it was like, that's what I'm going to do. Not even really knowing why I was doing it.
Yeah.
But it was like, I felt like almost like just, sheep in the system
100%.
of like, I'm just going to college. And I hear this often of like, someone going to college and you're like, what are you studying? Well, I think I'm going to do this, or, communications degree. And you're like, well, what do you want to do? And you're like, I don't know. I think I'll figure it out when I'm there. And you're like,
stop doing that. But what's so fascinating too is like not judging the way, but at some level, 30 years ago, right, a lot of the system, right, and the principles of what they were building started to make sense, right? Like back then, and that we needed a way to ensure that people were being trained and educated, but then the education turned into the schooling and the schooling now, but we don't live in that world anymore. I mean, you've said this all the time, but like, there are so many programs and online learning platforms and YouTube that you can learn anything, that even, you're right, like 30, 40 years ago, a degree was a really big deal, almost in any field. And now it's not a barrier of entry. It just really isn't. And so I think we have to look at also, even just circumstantially, we just live in very different world, that because our access to learning differently is so high and the tools that we have to support us are so great, that it's just different. But again, we keep trying to do the same thing. So people are like, I'm getting a marketing degree. You're like, you live like, my 7-year-old actually knows how to do TikTok better than your marketing degree does, because it's like, I'm just using
it's evolving and changing so fast. By the time you get your degree, it's already outdated.
Like Zion, like watching him on the phone and be able to click the buttons and all that, and then watching our parents, and like, I think Zion's 3 knows how to navigate Facebook.
That's a perfect example. I think the even the older generation, and or just people in general, can make an excuse of like, well, I didn't grow up with that, or I don't know how to do that. And you're like, I didn't necessarily grow up with it either, because some of this technology came out.
MySpace, baby. We're hanging out on MySpace.
But it evolves and changes. So at some point you learn it, just like, the chat or the AI and all the things that are coming out right now with that. It's like, you either are going to learn it because it's going to be around and who knows how big it's going to get, or you can stay ignorant and say, well, it scares me, or I don't want to use it, or the robots are going to take over, or whatever. That's fine, but you're going to get left behind to a certain degree. Like,
and then if you do, great, do you, but don't complain.
100%.
Like, that's my big thing. Like, at some level, if you're not complaining about not using the tool, then it doesn't bother me. But the minute that I'm complaining about the reality, I'm like, if you're not willing to do something about it, don't stop complaining.
Yeah, and there's literally a video for everything on YouTube. Like, we were playing around with the monitor that we have, and it's like, I go to YouTube, I type in the model, and I type in the word that I'm, trying to flip the screen, and someone did a video for it.
So by the way, as a wife, here's what I don't do anymore. I don't know. I rarely will ask Travis, how do you do this? Because he looks at me with the eyes of, did you YouTube it? I'm always like, I'm YouTubing that. As it's coming out of my mouth, let me YouTube it.
And there again, that's obviously we joke about that too, but it's like, if you want to learn something, you have to take the time to learn it. Yeah. Like, there again, if someone asks me a question, that's my first question back to them. Did you YouTube it or Google it?
Yeah.
And there again, it's not the end all source. It's going to open up the sources to allow you to say, okay, like, I like what this person says. Malachi is doing it, and he's done a phenomenal job figuring out how to do multiple Rubik's Cubes. Yeah. And he's like, oh, I watch these different people, and these people say this way and this people, but I like how this person said it, and they actually, said it so it made more sense. And then this person, what they were saying actually didn't even make any sense. And so he's starting to connect the dots of like, don't just go for and listen to, if you're trying to learn something and listen to one person, listen to multiple people, get different opinions, and then make up your own decision on how you're going to do it. And that's
called innovation.
We have absolutely loved watching this process with Malachi. Incredible. Figuring out how to do this Rubik's Cube.
Yeah. Well, and it was because when he first came to us, it was like, hey, help me with this. I looked at my, oh, no, that's not the hard I choose. And I think both of us were going, buddy, we love you. And
I told him to go to YouTube right away.
Oh, I looked at him, I was like, no, it's not my jam.
Yeah, I don't want to figure it out. Like, honestly, that's not where I want to spend my time. I love that you're going to spend your time there.
Yeah.
but I don't want to spend my time there.
But then that shows immediately of that anything is going to be possible for those who are hungry enough to learn. And so I think that that's really in closing, our heart in our approach as parents, and our heart for us as each other, and anyone who's listening, is that this is not a right or wrong, blame, shame, guilt, you should do it this way or fit. No, it's a exposure to learning and the love of learning, and having these critical conversations of ensuring as families that we're just not doing what's always been done, that you don't have to do it just because your parents did it that way or because the schooling system does it that way, that there is expression and room to lean in and ultimately to fall in love with learning, because to your point, like, that's the key to freedom.
Yeah. How resourceful, I think Tony Robbins says it, and I forget exactly how he says it, but it's basically how resourceful are you going to be?
Yeah.
And so whatever you want in life, it really comes back to how resourceful are you going to be?
Yeah.
So I think going into that age, it's like identifying and helping the kids, think, and understand it's self-development too.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people at a certain age stop wanting to learn or self-improve. And I think that to me is so critical, is like, if you want something bad enough, you can figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And then here's a few, like, here's step 1 and step 2 every time.
Yeah.
And then you go down that path, and then you understand if you're passionate about it enough to keep going, or you're like, no, I don't really want to do it.
Yeah.
And so I love this conversation because we have some time, but it allows us to lay the foundation with our kids to say, like, when we get to that age, or that age in their life, it's like we're already prepared for it, and we don't really care which direction, but there has to be a purpose and a plan behind it.
Yeah. And then I would say to everyone, so if your kids aren't 10 or 6 or 5 and you go, well, I've missed that boat. No, I think that there is, right. Yeah. Best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the next best time is today, which means you're never too old to start the love of learning. You're never too old to lean in and uncover, okay, what do I want to learn? Right? Like, you're like, well, I don't know where I start. Well, there. Fall in love with learning again, and then let it lead you on the path of understanding, to your point, the next thing and the next thing, because I think when you uncover that, you uncover so much more.
Yeah. And we've talked about it in other podcasts, but it's like, if you come to that place and you're saying that I don't know, then rephrase the question. And if I wasn't afraid, what would I do? What would I learn? What would I try? Where are my weaknesses that I need to get better at? And am I going to spend the time, effort, and energy to actually study all the aspects of it? Or am I going to find the right people that can give me the information, and I'm going to have to pay them for it?
Solid. So if you want to pay Travis to learn all the things.
No, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm not for hire.
You know what? From special ed to for hire, ladies and gentlemen, Travis Gentry. But truly, on behalf of our entire family, who is willing to learn, willing to go, willing to take a few risks, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. And ultimately, we just hope that it opens up critical conversations between you, your family, your loved ones, to develop a love for learning. And until next time,
dream on.